The Bemidji City Council spent close to 3 hours in the City Hall meeting room last night working on finalizing the budget and setting the levy for 2026.
Beltrami County Commissioners approved a 9.63% property tax levy increase for 2026. And if you live inside of the Bemidji city limits like I do, the city of Bemidji raised its levy on top of that. But here's the strange part, because the county told me my home actually was worth less than it was the year before. But then my tax bill showed up and the amount I owed still went up.
What?
And it wasn't some tiny increase either. If the same thing happened to you, you're not crazy and it wasn't a mistake, because two separate boards voted to raise their levies this year, and most people never even heard about either vote. Today I'm going to show you exactly how your home can lose value but still cost you more in property taxes, and then I'll explain why 2027 could be even worse, because the county has already told us that more financial pressure is coming. Hey, my name is Tyler and I'm a real estate agent right here in Bemidji, and I pay close attention to the decisions that affect our local housing market. Property taxes come up in almost every conversation I have with buyers and sellers, because while most homeowners look at their bill once or twice a year, I'm looking at property tax statements every week on listings and properties that my clients are considering. Okay, before we get into what changed for 2026, we need to talk about how your property tax bill actually works, because this is the part that most homeowners were never really taught. When your statement shows up, it actually kind of looks like just one tax bill, but it's really at least 3 separate bills stacked together. The first layer is Beltrami County, and every property owner in the county pays that portion. The second layer depends on your address, because if you live inside of Bemidji city limits like I do, you pay the city of Bemidji, while homeowners that live outside city limits usually pay their township instead. And the third major layer is the school district. There are some smaller pieces mixed in here too, but those 3 layers are responsible for most of what you see on the bill. Every December, each of those local governments sets something called a levy, which is simply just the total amount of money that the government plans to collect from all of us combined. The easiest way to understand this is to think of the levy as the entire pie, while your individual property tax bill is just your slice of that pie. Keep that picture in mind, because it's the key to understanding how your home's value can go down while your taxes still go up. Now let's look at what happened for 2026, starting with Beltrami County. In December, the county board voted to raise its levy by 9.63%, bringing the total amount collected by the county to about $36.5 million. It's a lot of money. That vote was 4-1, and it came after hours of public comments from residents. The county's explanation is that inflation has increased its costs, our local tax base is relatively small, and the state and federal governments continue shifting more costs down to the county level. And believe it or not, the original proposal would have been even larger. County staff started with a plan that would have required an increase of nearly 16.5%. Ouch. But the board lowered that number by cutting programs and reducing spending in other areas. One of those cuts received a lot of attention, because the funding for Bemidji and Black Duck libraries dropped from about $437,000 to $265,000, which is the minimum amount allowed by the state. Residents packed the meetings to push back against the cut, but the reduction passed anyway. And then we have the city of Bemidji, which raised its levy by 4% after initially considering a 6% increase earlier in the fall. That final vote was 4-3, which tells you just how divided the council was over that decision. There were 2 major reasons why the city said it needed additional money, with the first being the June windstorm from last year. That created as much as $2 million in unexpected costs. The city used its reserves to cover much of the storm cleanup, and now it needs to begin building those reserves back up. The second major reason was the court fight with Northern Township, which came with its own legal expenses. If you missed that story, I made an entire video on what happened between Bemidji and Northern Township. I'll leave that link below, or you can just click right up here. When you add in all the normal increases in insurance and energy costs, along with the brand new fire truck included in the city's plans, you end up with the increase we received. Now there's one important difference for anyone who lives outside of Bemidji city limits. The city's 4% increase doesn't affect your bill at all, because your second local layer is your township rather than the city of Bemidji. Every township board sets its own levy, and township taxes in our area are usually lower than the city of Bemidji, which is a big part of why the Northern Township annexation fight became a major issue. The school district also sets its own levy, and the district is currently dealing with a budget deficit of its own, but that's a much larger story, and one that I probably plan on covering in a separate video. Okay, now let's get to the part that most people misunderstand, and honestly, this might be the most useful thing to know about your property tax bill. A 9.63% county levy increase doesn't automatically mean that the county portion of your personal bill will increase by 9.63%. Remember that pie example I talked about at the beginning of the video? Because the levy is the size of the whole pie, while your property tax bill is just that individual slice. The size of your slice depends on what the county believes your property is worth compared to the value of every other property being taxed. If your home's value increased faster than the average property, your slice of the pie gets a little bit bigger, which means your property taxes could increase by more than the levy. But if your value stayed flat while other properties increased, increased, your share of the pie may become a little bit smaller, which could reduce the size of your increase. And that brings me back to the question from the beginning of this video, because how can your home lose value according to the county, but still cost you more in property taxes? Well, it's because the pie itself just became bigger. The county is collecting more money from all of us this year, while according to the county, home values around our area were mostly flat or down. This isn't true about the actual market value of your home though, because home prices have continued to rise in our area. Your share of the pie may have become slightly smaller, but the entire pie grew faster than your share shrank. Holy cow, try to say that 3 times fast. Which is how a property can be worth less on paper, but still come with a larger tax bill. Now let me show you what it actually looks like on a real property tax statement. All right, so here is my actual 2026 proposed property tax statement. So this is what the county deems my house will be taxed at. So you can see right up here for 2025, it said that my estimated value is $350,000. That's pretty low. But this year, 2026, it has it at $347,800. Now that's of course before the homestead exclusion, which we'll talk about in a second. But that still increased my taxes. So if you look right down here, the total property tax and special assessments last year $4,192, this year $4,402. But still, the county says that my home actually lost value. That is what I'm talking about. And this is where you'll see Beltrami County taxes, you'll see the city of Bemidji taxes. This is where you would see your township if you don't live inside of the city limits. And then of course you've got your school district and then your other stuff that kind of all adds up to what your total amount is. And somehow the value went down while my property taxes went up. But here's the part that I really want you to hear, because the 2026 increase may not be a one-time thing either. The county administrator has said during public meetings that these cost shifts are expected to continue to grow, and the county is projecting another $2 to $3 million in lost funding next year alone. And when county lenders discussed the $700,000 contingency fund included in this year's budget, they basically said that's only the first installment. Now look, I'm not telling you this to scare you, because the important thing is understanding when these decisions are made and when homeowners actually have a chance to speak up. The numbers for 2027 will begin taking shape in just a couple months, because by the end of September, both the county and the city must set their preliminary levies for the following year. That preliminary levy becomes the ceiling, which means it can be lowered before the final vote in December, but it can't be increased. That makes September through December the most important window for residents who want to follow the discussion or share their opinions. And last year's library debate proved that showing up can change the conversation, even when the final vote doesn't go the way the residents hoped it would. There are also 3 practical things that you can do to make sure you understand your own bill and aren't paying more than you should. First is to make sure that your home is classified as a homestead property if you own it and use it as your primary residence. Remember, that's what I showed you on my property tax bill. The homestead classification lowers your property taxes, and I still come across homeowners who never completed the paperwork. It's a free one-time application through the county's assessor's office, and if you want a copy of that, leave a comment with your email down below and I'll send you a copy of it. The second is when your property valuation notice arrives next spring, take time to read through it instead of just throwing it into a drawer like most people do. That notice tells you what the county believes your property is worth, and that value is being used to calculate the following year's tax bill. If that value appears too high, you can appeal it, but you must do that during the spring appeal period. By the time your final property tax bill arrives, it's already too late to challenge that valuation being used for the year. Third is to pay attention to when your preliminary levy numbers are released in September, because that's your early warning sign of what could happen the following year. The public hearings in December are where residents get the opportunity to speak directly to the boards before the levies are finalized. And hey, while we're talking about important dates here, the second half of your property taxes are due on October 15th. So make sure you have that one on your calendar if you don't escrow your property taxes. Okay, great, but what does all of this mean if you're planning to buy or sell a home? Well, if you're buying, don't automatically trust the property tax number shown on the listing sheet, because that's usually the previous year's bill, and it may also be based on the seller's homestead status, or if they're a retired veteran. There's lots of different ways that property taxes can be a little bit lower for a specific owner. I've seen buyers build their entire monthly budget around the old tax number, only to get an unpleasant surprise when they've owned the home for just over a year. When the county, city, or township and the school portions all increase, that reduces what buyers can comfortably afford in much the same way that a mortgage rate increase does. That's one more reason why pricing your home correctly matters more today than it did a few years ago. But I also want to be fair about what actually happened here, because nobody enjoys a tax increase, including the guy who sells houses for a living. The main takeaway isn't that you should panic, because these numbers are debated and decided every fall during public meetings that most regular homeowners never attend. But now you know when those decisions happen, how the calculations work, and what you should be watching for before the next bill arrives. The county raised its levy, the city raised its levy, and your individual bill represents a slice of the larger pie. And county leaders have already warned us that the financial pressure isn't expected to disappear next year. Now, if you're thinking about buying or selling anywhere in the Bemidji area and you want to work with real numbers instead of just guesses, reach out to me directly. You can call or text me at 218-308-1230 or head to tylermontgomery.com, and I'll help you understand what your next move may actually cost. Now, I'm curious if the same thing happened to you that happened to me, where my property value went down, but my tax bill still went up. And what do you think Beltrami County should do differently when it begins working on the 2027 budget? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if local housing and real estate updates like this are helpful, be sure to get subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the next video.